Hello, my name is Diez, and we're going to talk about persuasion. This is module 9 within the MOOC, Emotion in Language at Work. First of all, let me introduce the concept of persuasion. In every communicative process, we make sense of our surrounding reality and handle a complex world of social relationships via discourse. Within these communicative processes, persuasion is one of them, and we depart from the premise that any emotive evaluative process underlies every persuasive expression, since we analyze the other's reality, that is his or her beliefs, points of view, convictions. We reinterpret and recategorize their reality to present ours as a more valid option, with the final aim of making the other reconsider his or her own worldview. The relevance of emotion, what Aristotle called pathos, in persuasion was pointed out by him way back in the 4th century before Christ in his treatise called The Art of Rhetoric. Aristotle also grounded persuasion on two other decisive appeals. Building your credibility, what he called ethos, and using logical arguments or reasons, what he called logos. Ethos is an attempt to establish a relationship of trust with the audience and convince them you are someone they should listen to. The way to do that is appealing to your expertise. Questions such as, does the speaker know his or her subject? Does he or she have the sources and research to back up what he says? Are questions that the audience would ask about the speaker to see whether they have a reliable ethos or not. Also, trustworthiness is another issue important to consider. And the questions to address regarding the speaker would be things like, does the speaker seem to, like people you would trust? Why or why not? And also, does the speaker sound too eager to persuade? In that case, we may not trust the speaker that much. Regarding the other two appeals, logos and pathos, well, logos is the use of reasoning to persuade. And the questions to be asked would be, is the information presented supported by evidence? Are there any counter-arguments used to present opinions that are different from that of the speakers? Regarding pathos, that's an attempt to put the audience in the right frame of mind to accept the speaker's arguments. And the questions to be asked would be, what emotions are evoked? Is the speaker trying to manipulate me through my feelings? Is emotion being used ethically? Logos, which is being persuasive through reasons and adequate evidence, targets the brain. Whereas pathos, which is trying to persuade through our humanness, targets the heart. Let me give you an example from LinkedIn in which well, we have different tools for self-promotion which actually appeal to these three persuasive appeals. On the first hand, we have the picture. The picture, as you can see, is a close-up of a headshot that looks professional. That is appealing to the ethos of the professional who's presenting himself in LinkedIn. Then they use a professional headline intended to indicate what professional value people bring. That can be considered as an appeal to logos. Third, they also point out their experience, which is in this case the current title, appealing as well to logos. And finally, there's an appeal to pathos through mentioning the contacts or number of connections that the professional at hand has. Another concept that is related to persuasion is the concept of fallacy. A fallacy is an argument that is more persuasive than it should be because it rests on faulty premises and assumptions, as the definition according to the University of Maryland Writing Center says. Each persuasive appeal can be used fallaciously, and therefore we have ethical fallacies, like for example, if you vote for X, you will regret, right? This is an appeal to threat. We also have logical fallacies, such as all Spaniards are bullfighters. This can be considered a hasty generalization, right? When we applied what is specific of a group to the general public. And finally, pathetic fallacies, such as when a student says to the teacher, if I don't pass this exam, I won't be able to graduate, right? So he's appealing to pity, the teacher's pity to pass him the subject. Well, a piece of warning, fallacies should be avoided because they are a failure in reasoning that leads to unsound or misleading arguments. Now I'm going to mention some principles that underlie persuasion, persuasive discourse, which have to do very much with our psychology. The first principle is what is called the cognitive dissonance theory, according to which humans seek balance and equilibrium. When our beliefs are undermined or directly challenged, we experience discomfort until we either reinforce our faltering beliefs or make a judgment to accommodate the challenge to our belief systems. The second principle is called reciprocity, which is related to the first one. So in order to avoid dissonance and thus damaging our self-esteem, when given a gift, we tend to give something in return. This is what is called the universal gratitude principle. If I praise you, you praise me. I value you, you buy my products. That's what advertising language does. Also, as Michele says, as Santiago Gerbos mentions in his book, there's no better vitamin than praise. The next principle, let me show you first an example of reciprocity in LinkedIn, which is the professional tool that we've been mentioning before. In this case, we have reciprocity by mentioning a number of recommendations. Right? Alba, who wrote the manual, I'm on LinkedIn, Now What, recommends if you want a recommendation, give a recommendation. That is, I praise you, you praise me. So this is the same principle is functioning here. This appeals to the pathos of the speaker. Another principle would be that of gregariousness, which claims that being part of the group makes you feel safe. And the social proof for this principle is what is called the bandwagon effect, according to which everyone else is doing this, thus you want to do it too. An example from LinkedIn would be when you take part in numerous groups, and you, as Alba says, you look for groups that are relevant to you. You have to respect the rules of interaction, what is called the netiquette. And other principles you have to follow, you should be nice, you should be concise, and you should avoid sarcasm, and you should consider cultural differences. Therefore, all these principles or advice appeals to ethos, to the ethos of the professional. Another principle would be foreseeability. Well, it makes us feel safe because it eliminates uncertainty. Rituals organize life, making us feel safe. That which is regular, familiar, foreseeable is processed with a minimum cognitive effort. Also, taking into account this economy, we have the cognitive economy principle, according to which communication is possible because the speakers have expectations regarding the message. That is, not everything is mentioned in the message. There's a lot of background knowledge to take into account. Stereotypes and prejudices are symptoms of cognitive economy, right? Because they are foreseeable. Another principle that is working in persuasion is the scarcity principle, right? We praise things that are uncommon more highly, right? Because having one sets a person apart from the rest. This gives us exclusivity, prestige, right? So that's why signs like sold, the only one left, would make us buy a product. Another principle or set of principles underlying persuasion are those of, is that of submission to different types of authority. The first authority would be the orator's authority. Her reputation, credibility, respectability, that is the authority, what is called the ethos, will make us believe the person, right? The social, professional, political authority of the speaker or the writer. That's why when applying this principle to LinkedIn, it is important to appear as an expert. In this case, as you can see, well, Jason says also knows about all these things, right? So that makes you appear as an expert. Other authorities to which we are submissive are channel, context, and code. Regarding channel, well, communication means transmit ideological cliches, we all admit. Professionals, to be professionals, must join LinkedIn, right? If you want to if you want to reach the market, you need to be in LinkedIn. That's your personal branding. Also, contextual authority, where the message is transmitted communicates as well, right? Whether it is the parliament, a podium, the internet, a MOOC, for instance, right? So, successful LinkedIn personal page has a large number of connections. Also, code authority. The message should be beautiful because it gives authority to the content, right? In this case, technical language is perceived as rigorous, scientific, reliable, even if not understood. So expressions such as coaching people on career management, log on your elevator pitches, network is key to our career management. They all sound professional, right? So they should be used in contexts like LinkedIn. The first one the first authority appeals to ethos, whereas the second one has to do with pathos, because we're talking about the number of connections, and the last one appealed to logos. So as you can see, all those authorities have some relation with the three appeals that Aristotle mentioned. To summarize, we have three persuasive appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos appeals to the credibility of the speaker, logos to his or her rationality, and pathos to emotion. Also, we should avoid fallacies because they are an example of default reasoning, so they weaken our arguments. And also, there are a series of principles that underlie persuasion that we should take into account. So be reciprocal or be dissonant, be gregarious or be isolated, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And as a final conclusion, I say persuasion appeals fundamentally to emotions, universal and cultural stimuli to feel safe, linked to others due to our vulnerability. Let me finish with an exercise. A kind of reflection for you to see why you think that these speakers are credible, right? So we're going to reflect upon ethos a bit. Well, the first one, as you can see, is President Lincoln. The second one is Martin Luther King. The last one is President Obama. Okay. And I have a question for you. Look at their words, right? I'm going to show you the beginning of each of their speeches. What calls your attention, right? It will be the first one. 47 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Right? This is the beginning of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, who was issued in 1863. The second one is I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King. In the beginning of his speech is 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This was released in 1963, 100 years later than the Gettysburg Address. The last one was President Obama's inaugural address when he became president for the first time. And he started his speech by saying, "My fellow citizens, I stand here today humbled by the task before us, grateful for the trust you have bestowed mindful of the sacrifices borne by our ancestors. And this was released in 2008. Well, as you can see, all speeches actually echo each other. Right? King's speech is actually mentioning direct reference to Lincoln's statue, because as he says, that, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today. Because the speech, when King gave his speech, he was standing right in front of this statue at Lincoln's memorial. Okay? And he also started his speech echoing Lincoln's words 70 years ago, 7 years ago. In the same line, President Obama makes reference to the ancestors and the sacrifices made by the ancestors. But remember that this was the Gettysburg Address, whose a dedication to the cemetery of the fallen in the Gettysburg battle. So he's also mentioning, echoing that historical event. He's also referring implicitly to ancestors who sacrificed themselves, such as King, to basically defend the rights of the colored Americans. Well, so taking into account the question, I'm going to tell you some key answers to that question, right? Why are they credible? Well, first of all, because of their expertise. The speakers know their subjects. They use historical sources and legal written documents, such as the Emancipation Proclamation. They also have trustworthiness. They are people trust them because they are in that position. They trust them because of their position in the community. They are either the president of the country or a well-known reverend, such as King, who fights as activists for human rights. There are also three things that influence the perception of their character. One is diction, the other one is dynamism, and also repetitions. Right? There's kind of slogans. Lincoln's slogan would be the government of the people, by the people, for the people. King's slogan would be have a dream. And Obama's would be yes, we can. They are also good communicators. They use rhetorical figures such as analogy, repetition, parallelism. They also connect with the audience. The whole nation is incorporated in their speech. They talk about my friend. They use the pronoun we. And they also use extemporaneous delivery. That is, they don't read their speeches. They perform them, right? Therefore, they can have eye contact with the audience. Well, this is basically the end of the module. In this, the module is formed by 4 lessons. In the first 3 lessons, we will talk about the persuasive appeals more deeply, ethos, logos, and pathos. And then we'll have a 4th lesson dealing with fallacies, which is default reasoning that tries to manipulate the audience. And we'll deal with different types of fallacies: ethical, logical, and pathetic. Thank you for listening.